All right. Trump Gaza. This was one of those moments where I just sat and thought to myself, can someone please take his social media away from him? Uh, we were moving so many steps forward, and this just felt like a very strange step back. So let me just start with that. So let me start with playing you a short clip of this Trump Gaza video that was posted on his social media account.
Tunnels coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, gold.
All right, let's just say it. Okay, that was weird. That was really weird. And I do not condone this video in any way. So I wanted to open with saying that. Again, I've said I'm not going to be the person that completely endorses a political candidate because I'm probably always going to have some kind of disagreement with them. And although I really do appreciate and support most of what Trump has done so far, this is not one of those things. However, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I'd like to make two main points that maybe we can just take a deep breath, take a step back, and think these things through a little bit more. So, there are Christians that have legitimate critiques of this video, and one of them would be me. There's lots of things wrong with this video. There were bearded women dancing. There's older men with their shirts off on the beach, and Trump at a nightclub, and it's just weird. It's not a good video. And I think I just did a Trump hand movement for some reason. Oh my goodness. Okay. Let's disregard that. Let's move on. But anyway, yeah, there's Christians with legitimate critiques of this, and I totally understand speaking out against this, saying, "Hey, we don't sign off on this. We don't support this," because I don't either. It's very weird. Now, I'm not speaking about specifically should we take over Gaza. I don't even think we necessarily have enough details to make a really good call one way or the other on that yet, not that I've heard. Although I will say there are people that specialize in foreign policy and with Israel and the Middle East that are supportive of this. And then, of course, you can find people that are not supportive because they just don't want the United States to be involved at all. And I can respect that. I personally, without knowing all the details, without knowing, I'm not an expert on foreign policy, but personally, I don't see it going the way that they think it will. But also, Trump has surprised me before, and he's a really good negotiator. That's his main skill in life. I mean, he wrote a book on it, and we've seen that play out so far with lots of things that he's done where he's been able to negotiate and use leverage rather than having to pay more money or send troops on the ground, which I would absolutely not want over there. But I don't know that he fully grasps the depth of the animosity that exists over there between those people groups and the history behind it. Maybe he does. I'm really unsure. I can't give an opinion on whether or not we should take over Gaza, but that's not what I'm speaking about right now. I'm just talking about the way that they promoted this through this video. I'm not speaking to Christians with legitimate critiques and concerns about something like this, but I do want to speak to the people calling him the Antichrist on the internet over this video. I just think that's a little bit too far, and it's a really extreme thing that we like to jump to as Christians or people maybe with a little bit less spiritual maturity to be able to say, hey, this is a little bit much. I don't know that releasing this weird internet troll video, which is really how I think he saw it, even though I disagree with it. I think that was his intention, was that he thought it was funny, and he's at the point where he just doesn't care anymore. He just doesn't care. And part of that I am enjoying and I'm glad, but then this just went a little bit too far. But the Antichrist, really? I find it hard to believe that the Antichrist would be pushing so many policies and things that are directly out of the Bible, like, hey, there's only two genders, it's male and female, and standing up for life and standing up for women's sports and order, at our border and having a secure border and a sovereign nation. So I don't think that that's quite it. So I just think that's a little bit of an overreaction. And most of those people that I've seen screaming that, oh, this is the Antichrist, and oh, aren't you Christians so ashamed? Had nothing to say about Biden's crusade against the unborn or young girls and allowing boys in girls' locker rooms and sports and private spaces. They had nothing to say about Kamala preaching inside of a church while running on a platform of abortion and radical gender and transitioning children. So, it's just hard for me to take it very seriously when those people had nothing to say about that. They also have very little to say about Trump opening his first cabinet meeting in prayer and crediting to God his life over and over and over again, standing up for life, standing up for biological reality, like we've already said, and protecting girls. This party is supposedly the party of feminism, and all of that has really crumbled and fallen apart through the transgender ideology and the way that it's played out, with allowing women to essentially be erased through this transgender ideology if it really did play out how they say it, which it's the logical conclusion of feminism, but no one really wants to talk about that or admit that. So they just kind of have to keep bowing to the mob and the direction that it's gone and pretending like they can marry feminism and the advocacy for women and transgender ideology that says women, the word women is meaningless altogether and it doesn't mean anything. So let's just have some perspective here, okay? It's weird. Yes, it's not great. I wish he hadn't posted it. However, again, I think he probably just thought it was funny and it was not funny. We can also just continue praying for him. Instead of immediately jumping to the extreme like the Antichrist, we can pray for him. We can pray that he's genuinely saved, that he genuinely does know God. And as most of us should know, when you are first saved, again, this is not a justification, okay? Please don't hear me say that. But when you are first saved, God does not address every single thing with you at once. You don't wake up the next day and become a perfect person. So I think there's lots of evidence to show that Trump does have genuine faith. And I would say a close encounter with death like that, and it being very obvious that God protected your life, that would be something that would trigger that. And I've also heard some really cool stories from people that have been close to him, like from the Unashamed podcast and their family and the way that their father has ministered to him and shared the gospel with him. So I think there's evidence for that. So let's just take a deep breath. Let's pray for President Trump and let's critique when we need to critique, but with a level head. You can go back and you can watch videos of President Trump from 2016 and compare them to him now, and you can see that there's a difference. Whether that's sanctification or just maturing, I don't know. That's really between him and the Lord, but you can see a difference. The man is much more humble, and I'm grateful for that, although he is still very confident. But I don't think that's a sin. It's not a sin to be confident necessarily, but he has definitely matured and become a little bit more humble. So I don't have a lot of patience for people that criticize hypocritically and jump to these very extreme accusations. Now we're going to get into a few of the highlights over the last few weeks because there have been some highlights in my opinion. So, the Trump Zelensky meeting. Let's talk about this. I'm not going to get into all of the depths and details of the Russian Ukraine war because, again, I am not a foreign policy expert. I don't know all the ins and outs of that war and the intricacies and the details of how to explain it to you and what I think should happen and is it the best way? I don't know. And I will be humble and honest and tell you that. I did do a lot of research and preparation, and I feel like I understand a lot more. And to be honest with you, I understand the support of Ukraine. I understand not wanting Russia to gain anything or to quote unquote win this war, if that's how it comes across or that's how it ends up happening. I get that. And I think the problem is that so many times with these issues, we really agree on the fact that, like across the aisle, like we don't want Russia to necessarily win. I would say most people probably agree with that. Most people probably agree that what has happened to the Ukrainian people has been absolutely devastating and horrendous for them to live through, and no one wants that. What happens though is that we don't agree on the solution. And I think the tendency, if I'm being honest with you, and if we take a step back and look, the tendency is from the left is to have this very unrealistic solution that they bring to the table that's just simply not going to work. Just even, it's not my opinion, it just wouldn't work. Like, take gun control, for example. You want so you see this terrible thing happening with children being shot in schools, and your side says, well, let's just take all guns away. But the conservative side knows, and we can see throughout history how that plays out. And it doesn't play out well for the average citizen of that nation, because then the government can do whatever they want. And historically speaking, especially in the last couple of 100 years, that has led to the deaths of hundreds of millions of people. So we don't agree on the solution. We both agree that this thing is bad, but we have to come to the table with something that's realistic and that will actually work. And so I think that's what Trump is trying to do here. He is trying to be a third party. He wants the war to end so that people will stop being hurt by this war. Trump and Vance had this meeting with Zelensky in front of the press that went on for, I believe, over an hour even. And Zelensky, if you go back and watch the full clip, it's painful to watch. He interrupts a lot, which just seems very disrespectful to be in another country, to be inside their Capitol building with their president, and to be interrupting the way that he did. And overall, I will say, I believe Trump and Vance did a great job. I don't think they lost their temper. They were very strong, but I don't think that they lost their temper. I mean, there were people all over X saying this was a screaming match. This was so embarrassing. They acted like children. I don't think so at all. And I think this is just the product of very effeminate men, out of the product of a feminized and feminist culture, that you think that this was embarrassing. I think they were strong and they were confident, and they stood up for America, and they stood up for the American people. And so people are upset by that. And that's not shocking, because most young people today have been taught to hate their own country. But Christianity today has the most ridiculous response per usual. So this is an article that they put out comparing this to Benjamin Franklin and Louis the 16th. So I'll link the article. You can go read it for yourself. But the problem is they're creating this false comparison of Benjamin Franklin and Zelensky, which a lot of people have made the point, like Tucker Carlson. You can go watch that episode with him. I can't remember who he's on with, but he talks about Zelensky, and the other person's calling Putin a dictator. But Tucker Carlson's point is, how do you define a dictator? Because in a lot of ways you could classify Zelensky that way. And so he's not saying that the Ukrainian people deserve this, or that he wants Russia to win. He's just saying, okay, let's take a step back and see that both of these countries overall have not been great. It's not like it's just been a political paradise in Ukraine over the last century. So to compare Benjamin Franklin, who was fighting for the free world in the United States and the colonies, to Zelensky is absolutely a ridiculous false narrative. In reality, Zelensky and Putin are both not good guys. I would say overall don't have their people's best interests at heart, and we've already sent billions of dollars into this war that we did not have in the first place. And they can't answer for where several billion of that has gone. Zelensky came out and said that, and admitted that he couldn't account for where some of this money has gone, which is totally unacceptable, but not surprising. And it's probably come back to line the pockets of a lot of our congressmen and government officials. So, and all of this is happening, mind you, while neglecting our own people in North Carolina that did not get the help that they need, that are currently still living in RVs and over the winter were suffering in the cold without the help of their government until Donald Trump took over. But here again, we see this problem like I was talking about before, and not just North Carolina, in Hawaii and California, all of these things happening over the last 4 years. But here's the problem that I was talking about. We both see this issue, and then your side wants to continue funneling billions of dollars into this country, into corrupt hands that can't even account for where that money is going. And we're saying, hold on, that's not the best solution. It's actually not helping anyone. It's similar to BLM, where everyone wanted to virtue signal with the black squares and send their money to BLM, when in reality it bought people a bunch of mansions, because they don't actually care about who they say they care about, and just blindly funneling money to bureaucrats is not the best answer, and it's not the solution. So at some point, wars have to go through a compromise, and I really believe that Zelensky has been offered that, and he has been declining that. And it was there was an article that I found from the New York Post, and actually, lots of media, of course, are framing this in the way that Trump is what is standing in the way of peace here, when actually the New York Post said this. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that Ukrainian President Zelensky had already twice refused to sign a minerals deal with the United States. And so I can link a couple videos to explain to you about the mineral deal and the way that Trump is trying to use that to negotiate the ending of this war and grant Zelensky and Ukraine security from the United States. No, I won't get into that here, but he's already declined it twice to sign this agreement. He's being offered what you would think he would want. And so we have to ask the question, this begs the question of why. So back to the New York Post, this has to be one of the greatest diplomatic mishaps of all time by President Zelensky. Bessent said in an interview Friday with Laura Ingraham, host of Fox News, The Ingraham Angle. Bessent explained that Zelensky told him during a meeting in Kiev that he would not sign a mineral deal which would exchange billions of dollars in U.S. aid funding for rare earths and other resources from Ukraine. Zelensky also refused to close the deal with Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Bessent stated. And this just goes to show, again, that Donald Trump has the American people and our interest at the forefront of his mind, because he says, okay, if we're going to continue this, we're going to get something in return for our country, rather than just continuing to funnel out money that we don't have for nothing in return, which is what we have done for a long time. I'm not saying we can never do that, but we have been taken gross advantage of over the last several decades. And personally, I'm glad that we have strong men in the Oval Office. On the social media site X, Senator Eric Schmidt from Missouri posted, Zelensky could have signed the deal 5 days earlier, but wanted to come to the White House. He'd been difficult for 2 weeks, yet he wanted the White House meeting. Trump was upbeat about it even just the day before, publicly and privately the day of. Although he could have reset the whole thing, Zelensky was antagonistic and over the top. And I think if you go back and you watch the full, or at least some of the context before and after just the short clips that were being played on the media, you will see that. This was Trump's response on Truth Social. We had a very meaningful meeting in the White House today. Much was learned that could never be understood without conversation under such fire and pressure. It's amazing what comes out through emotion, and I have determined that President Zelensky is not ready for peace if America is involved, because he feels our involvement gives him an advantage in negotiations. I don't want advantage, I want peace. He disrespected the United States of America in its cherished Oval Office. He can come back when he is ready for peace. So let me just play you the clip of how this all turned out.
Diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are not strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the President for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
You
God
don't-
bless.
you don't know that.
God bless.
You don't know
God
that.
bless. You
Don't-
will not
you
have
gotta-
a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I love it. I love it. It is so refreshing to have strong men that will stand up for us in the White House. And I just don't care what the effeminate left men have to say about it. If you're embarrassed, I'm so sorry for you. But I think it's embarrassing that you feel embarrassed about that. So, one of the things that people have said for a long time is that Trump is Putin's lapdog. They say, well, it's not fair to compromise and to give up that part of Ukraine to Russia. Listen, this is the way of the world. This is how wars end, usually, is some kind of compromise. And at the end of the day, our government is responsible for our people and for our country. And it's better to compromise in a lot of cases than the continuation of a war that's killing people. And of course, there are some wars that were worth sending American soldiers into. I will not deny that. I believe that. You can't look at the Holocaust, and I couldn't say that we didn't need to send our troops on the ground and sacrificially serve our country to save those people and to be a part of ending that horrific war. So I'm not an expert on foreign policy, but I believe that this is the best path forward as the United States that's simply a mediator in trying to end this and negotiate the end of this war. But again, my biggest critique is the hypocrisy from this side, because you don't even care about the border in your own country. These are the same people that will tell you that you're a bigot and xenophobic if you don't allow an open border and the just unfettered influx of illegal immigrants into our country. And you believe in bankrupting America for the sake of another country potentially winning a war, but also, who knows, maybe it could go on for 20 years like our last war did, just to continue the war machine that makes people money. Do you expect other countries to do that for the United States? Really? Just stop and ask that question and answer that question honestly to yourself. Do you expect the same out of other countries as you do the United States? No, you don't. And we honestly can't expect to get anywhere when our responses to each other are so cutthroat and so violent and aggressive. We have to be able to come back to this place where we can have discourse, where we can have debate, where we can talk about different ideas and disagree with each other and still thrive, and the best idea wins out. Last but not least, we have Trump calling out the governor of Maine on transgender issues in sports. So I'll start with playing this clip for you of their interaction.
Not going to comply with it?
I'm complying with state and federal laws.
We are the federal law. Well, you better do it. You better do it, because you're not going to get any federal funding at all if you don't.
See you in court.
Every state, good, I'll see you in court. I look forward to that. That should be a real easy one.
I'll see you in court, Janet. We'll see you in court. I love it. Again, I love it. This is the kind of boldness and fierceness that we need when dealing with people that actually think a man can become a woman. Just stop and think about how ridiculous that is for a moment. And then to take it even further, that women should have to compete against men in women's sports, that girls should have to compete against boys in girls' sports. So why would we beat around the bush? Why would we protect their feelings? They don't care about protecting girls and women. This is the most basic thing. This is basic biological reality that these people can't even give the definition of what a woman is. That they actually can, they just don't want to, because it is beneficial for them. It's beneficial for them to play into this mob and continue this crazy narrative. So you have to have some respect for this kind of political courage, the clarity, the transparency, because there's a lot of Republicans that maybe now things have started to change, but honestly, just a year ago, weren't very willing to say this either. So I have a lot of respect for this, especially just honestly, the goal of like doing this in front of this amount of people is really something to be seen. So it's no games, it's no secrets with him. It's just you get what you get. So this is Governor Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, who is refusing to comply with President Donald Trump on the ban of boys in girls sports in public school. So then after this interaction, they were Trump threatened to strip Maine of its federal funding if it continues to refuse to comply with his executive order banning transgender women from competing in women's sports, marking the White House's last front in the nation's culture war on this issue. What's hilarious is that these people have no intellectual consistency. It's really something to behold. So she tweeted Trump last year before the election about recognizing women. So what happened was that Trump was on a phone call where he was being recorded and he kept referring to Mills as he. So she tweeted him and said in a brief retort on X, he better get used to recognizing women. He's about to get beat by one. Talking about obviously his Democratic opponent, Kamala Harris. But how can you not see the irony here? That you are tweeting at a man to recognize what a woman is when you can't even define what a woman is, when you don't care about the women and the girls in your own state. You're okay with them being permanently injured or maimed by competing with people that have a biological advantage over them. That is not debatable. Don't forget that the U.S. women's soccer team, we talked about this when I first started the show, because I followed the women's soccer team. I grew up playing soccer. I grew up watching them. They got beaten. The U.S. women's soccer team got beaten by 15-year-old boys. Okay. I played, I remember when I was older I think it was later on in high school, I think they were 12 and 13 and we were probably 16 and up with some seniors on our team and we got beaten by them. You cannot deny that there is a biological advantage that men have. They're stronger. They have a higher lung capacity. They're faster. And it's actually hurting women all across the country, and they don't seem to care about that. So the latest that I have is that the DOE Civil Rights Division opened an investigation into the Maine Department of Education, and that's all that we know so far. Allegations that they have not complied and are violating federal law is what they're investigating. So after this interaction, there were actually protests in Augusta, Maine to show solidarity for girls and women's sports. So here's a picture of that happening. This is a quote from Representative Smith on the significance of attending this protest. It's very important for us to make sure that the public know that we are absolutely 100% into defending and protecting our girls and their rights to a sport which they feel comfortable in, explains Representative Smith on this topic. She describes the state house as extremely divided, with legislators struggling to find common ground on these issues. This is not a difficult issue. This is not nuanced. This is not complicated. It's very black and white. Concerning the rights of quote-unquote transgender Mainers, Representative Smith says that there are several bills fighting for girls' sports and bathrooms to be for biological women only. Praise the Lord. Yes, of course, this is how it should be. You do not have the right to be transgender. This is something that is going to be decided probably this summer, this June, United States versus Crometti. This is something that has been argued as a part of that case, is that the side that is advocating for transgenderism is saying that, well, this is an immutable right, like your race, your ethnicity, your sex, your religion. These things are considered immutable rights that we have that you can't be discriminated based on. And so they are saying that this is one of those things. But you have to understand that it's self-defeating, because you just said that someone can ambiguously decide to change their gender. People can identify as a cat or an anime character or whatever they want, and then we have to accept it as a society. No, that means right there that it's not an immutable quality, that it is changing, and that statistically speaking, most people, especially younger people, grow out of this and mature out of this if they receive proper care, which most of them over the last few years have not received. But statistically speaking, most people grow out of this. And so that settles the matter right there. It's not an immutable right if it can change on every whim or feeling that blows your way. Your rights and your freedom end when they infringe upon someone else's. So it can't be a right of yours to be transgender when logically that plays out as a man that is a pedophile or a pervert gets to go into a woman's bathroom. That is not a right. You are infringing on the right of women to have privacy and to have safety. And up until a few years ago, everyone understood this to be true. And it's even come out now that the studies show, and that they were being suppressed, that none of this is true. And we already knew that. We know that innately, that this is wrong, that this is despicable, that this is wicked, that you're telling children and even grown-ups that they can cut off body parts and that they're going to feel better about themselves. They might for a time, but it fades. And the long-term studies show that they have a much higher likelihood of committing suicide, of being depressed, of suffering from addiction and self-harm. This is destroying people's lives. It is not loving, and it's not an immutable characteristic, and it is not a right. So praise God that President Trump had the boldness and the courage to stand up for this and to stand up to Governor Janet Mills. I hope it doesn't even have to come to court. I hope she listens to her constituents that are clearly out here protesting this, that don't want this, even many from the Democratic side. That's why so many have been coming to the Republican conservative side, because most normal people don't want this. And so praise God that we have a president that will stand up for women and stand up for girls.